I was going to save this question toward the end, but I'm actually wanting to talk about this now because you were talking about your YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And so when I see that channel and some of the videos I watch, I don't just see somebody that's putting them online just to build a following. I mean, you seem to put tremendous care, at least from my, watching them. When I see work like that, I'm like, wow, I wish I could be that talented. Do you feel satisfied with them?
It's a good question. Thank you, first of all.
Sure.
It's really nice of you to say. I think I want to keep getting better at them. I watch them and I see mostly just the flaws. Like especially, the first 2 videos, it's like one song looping in the background. And so about a year and a half ago, I broke my ankle and it was a bad break and I couldn't walk for about 4 months. And during that time that I was healing, I couldn't do anything except work at the computer. So, and literally I took the 4 months off that I was like staying at home. So I was like, well, I just put out the book. I can do these videos. So the funny thing is I was on Percocet and Vicodin the whole time I was recording. So when you listen to the audio, I kind of have this kind of, that's not just the professorial or the lecture tone. I was a little bit high when I was recording the audio.
Okay. Oh, I didn't notice that, but okay.
Cool. Yeah. I'm glad that it doesn't come off too drony, but because of that, I've been learning through the whole process. There's lots of audio issues. There's sometimes where the music's too high, and I was always self-conscious of my voice. So I didn't like the way my voice sounded. So there were times where I was consciously I love this song. I'll just put the song, and then people are like, "Can you drop the audio a little bit more because we can't quite hear it?" But now you can buy the book, and you get the actual words on the page.
Right. Well, I mean, some people are what do they say, auditory learners, others are visual. So
yeah.
For me, I think I'm probably, maybe more visual, but it's an experience to watch them. So
cool.
I know I keep
Very
harping
cool.
on it, but I mean, I think.
No, I appreciate that. I hope that they're compelling. My attention span moves very quickly. So I noticed that I tended to be drawn to videos that just hammer in as much information as possible, which is why I tend to just jump in as quickly as possible. And that's why they're really dense. I took an hour lecture and condensed it into the bare essentials in 8 minutes in the first few videos. And so they're dense, but that's also why I structured them in such a way that it has this kind of a table of contents, and it's, you can go back and re-watch different sections if you just want to look up like plot points. What is a plot point? And then you can just click on it and it'll take you exactly to that section of the video. So that way it has it has kind of a way to review it. You'll watch it and it's not intended to just watch once. It's they're based on the lectures and the stuff that I was teaching. So I'm hoping they're principles that people will revisit and it'll help them in their techniques and disciplines.
Well, I know they say that's that's the mark of a true artist, is that they're never finished with something. But have you met someone where you were surprised to hear from their own opinion about their work that they weren't satisfied with it, and it shocked you because you were in awe of it?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to this thing. I'm not convinced I believe in masters or mastery. That's my videos start off with that quote from Hemingway that we're all apprentices in a craft with no masters. The idea with masters is this idea that it's kind of this illusion that you have complete control of the work that you're making. And if you read the journals of all of the people that we regard as masters, great painters, great writers, all of them they might be further along up the trail, but they're still wondering what's over the next peak. And so in the end, it's all of us are on this journey together to try and find some sort of meaningful experience. So yeah, I mean, it's true. I'm especially, when I finish a piece, almost always the second I call it done, I hate it. I want to get away from it. I'll finish a first draft and I don't even want to think about it for at least a good 6 months. Or a painting or something. I'll do an oil painting, and then as soon as I finish it, all I'll see is the flaws. And then, I go back and revisit and rework it and stuff like that. And the hardest thing for me is to let something go. It's why deadlines are really good for me. If I have a deadline, I'll work my ass off to meet the deadline. And that way I can kind of have more control of at least, I have a point where I have to let go. So I'll kill myself to meet the deadline and then just let it go, which is taking time to get to that point.
The expression people, oh, you're so hard on yourself. Do you think, I mean, it's I guess it's, I don't know, whatever, but do you think that's almost imperative for an artist? Because what if they're so thrilled with their work, then they don't work on it, they don't try to tweak it?
I don't know. I mean, I think it really depends on the artist. I mean, you look at some artists, some of my favorite artists love their work. I do think I know lots of artists that I've worked with that they're just like, oh, everything I do is awful. And then you start wondering, well, why are you doing it if you hate it that much? I love my art. I love the process of creating art. I love the process of writing. I love losing myself in story. I can't stop. I literally can't turn it off. But there's also a kind of self-awareness. Hopefully there's a kind of humility that goes along with that, which is, but I need to get better at it, you know? At the core of storytelling, I feel like, at the core of art in general, is this kind of desire to excavate our own subconscious and draw out the metaphors that mean something to us. And then ultimately, it's like drawing wine from the grape, from the wine press. That the subconscious is the wine press. So we have this amazing drink, and then what we're looking for as artists is the perfect glass to deliver it to somebody else so that they can taste it. And that glass is structure. It's it's genre. It's the tropes that we use. It's ultimately about that's the vehicle we're using to be able to communicate it to somebody else. Like for you, what's art? How do you define art?
Well, something that has meaning for me, something that I can be lost in someone else's existence, and then you can see your own and weigh it against it and say, whether my life is better or worse, whatever, it's just, we're all like these little things existing in this world. No one's more no one's experience is more tragic or incredible than another. So we just kind of get lost in someone else's world, and just to see it from another thing, because I think we're so in ourselves, we can't see our own lives and how we do things or whatever. Nice. So I know, I mean, that's sort of a weird, I'm from the Bay Area, that didn't come across, but I think just to watch, for me, in terms of film or reading a book. That's great. I like that metaphor of the perfect glass to put the wine in.
So with art, like, I think that's beautiful. And like some of the things you mentioned is kind of getting lost or escaping something or engaging from a completely different perspective. And I think that's really at the core of what art is. For example, art versus science. Like my father's a scientist. He's also, aspiring artist, but he works as a scientist. He grew up, he worked as a scientist, retired now. Well, he teaches now. But the distinction that I draw between art and science, I don't know if you've ever read, what is it? Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
I think I did, actually, yes.
There you go. So they have this discussion about like techne and how techne is the original word for art, or is it the Latin root? Could be Greek. No, I think it's Greek. So technology was the same root as art. So science is really the process of extracting information from reality and having some sort of understanding. Art, I believe, is the process of taking that information and making it emotionally relevant. And that emotional relevance helps us build value systems. So really, science is a way of gaining an understanding of the world around us. Art is a way of making it mean something as we internalize it. So art is the process of internalizing. And story, in whatever body it takes, whether it be a painting, whether it be a film or a novel, all of these things are ways of ingesting and emotionalizing information that informs our value system.
And you said great art doesn't necessarily have to be escapism. Is that right? Maybe I'm not sure.
I don't really buy into the escapism paradigm. Like in my video about entertainment, I talk a little bit about that. And entertainment tends to be a little bit denigrated. Like it's like, well, it's the lowest form of art if it's just entertaining. But the discipline of entertainment, like I mentioned this in the video, that the root of it comes from the Latin entre tenere. Entre, between, tenere, to hold. And so literally entertainment means to hold your attention from moment to moment. So when you're looking at the art of entertainment, you're engaging someone else's mind and inspiring them to begin to open it, to ask questions, to provoke them to project their attention forward in time. And that question of what happens next is really what, when you know, if you get the audience to ask what happens next, then you're engaging them. And that means they're searching for meaning, and that's when it's open. That's when the art is happening. Because what's happening is they're looking for an emotional value system to internalize it into their own life. And that to me is the magic of story, when we're finding a new way to look at the world. So the escapism side, though I do think art can be escapist, ultimately, it's kind of like, it's like a magic trick. You're getting everybody to look over here. Isn't this interesting? Look at this thing, all of a sudden it disappears. But what's really happening internally is we're finding a way to make meaning in our lives. And that's true watching the Flintstones, watching SpongeBob. All of those things, it feels escapist because it's not necessarily, you don't feel like you're doing work necessarily. But the truth of it is great art is helping you expand your view of the world and find meaning in your life and engaging something that you wouldn't otherwise do that. This whole paradigm that I'm talking about kind of comes from this idea of like, are you familiar with Emile Durkheim? He's a sociologist, French sociologist.
I'm not.
Okay, so he's kind of the father of like modern sociology. And he built up this, he had this theory of the sacred and the profane. And this is where I get in trouble, but I think he was one of the great early thinkers about the way we develop value systems. And he was largely talking about religion and how with religion, it's defined by a group of people coming together and circling around sacred objects, what he called totems. And totems were essentially metaphors, or though they didn't believe they were metaphors, but they're metaphors that binded people together. And the other counterpoint to that was the profane. And the profane, so the sacred was that which was removed, according to Durkheim. And then the profane was that like the normal, everyday, mundane life. So like an example would be, the sacred would be walking up to a sculpture that embodies a god and lighting candles and have a very conscious ritual experience. And the mundane would be doing dishes and doing laundry. So that would be the profane versus the sacred. Now, this is where I get in trouble. I think he was looking at evidences or things that relate to the sacred and the profane, but it's not an adequate definition of it. The way I define the sacred and the profane is the sacred is that which is vital to your survival. And the profane is anything that threatens that. And we develop our value systems internally from there. Now you might be asking, what does this have to do with story? And at the core, it's we find meaning by that which we prioritize, right? And we prioritize based on our emotions. So our internal value system is our emotional structure, or our emotional makeup. That's kind of the map of the emotions. And those directly inform our moral values. And what story does is help us to engage those moral values through an emotional experience, which is why an effective story is innately emotional. And for example, a scientific narrative is largely just this, therefore this, therefore this. So a great artist, to me, great art isn't necessarily escapist or not. It's essentially defines itself by tapping into truths that resonate with multiple generations.